Okay, now we're going to talk about freezing rows and columns. And we touched a little bit on this on a previous module, but what I want to talk about now is, we talked about freezing the top row. Very easy to do, so we come into our View tab up at the top, and Freeze Panes is here. We can say very easily freeze our top row. And with that, now we can scroll down. I'm just scrolling on my mouse. We can scroll down and we can see all of our data scrolls up and down, and we can not lose track of our column headers here. So I'm going to unfreeze that. We've already talked about that. But what if you want to freeze something other than your first row? Well, it's just as easy. All you need to do is highlight, come over here to the far left side till you get the black arrow. Click on that number over here on the left, so you highlight the entire row, and then you click on Freeze Panes and then Freeze Panes. And you'll notice that row 4 is not going to be frozen. So the key to freezing panes is that when you freeze them, the row above the row that you have selected will be frozen, and everything else will be mobile. So you can scroll then up and down here. So you may want to do this if you're comparing a group on top to a group on bottom, so that way you can kind of freeze the panes and look through things. So let's say, this top group, we want to compare our first 10 employees here to the rest of the data set. We're going to click on row 12 or employee 11. We're going to say freeze panes, and now we can compare whoever we want to that top row. The other thing that we can do, I'm going to say unfreeze here. The other thing that we can do is freeze columns, and this is really helpful when you have super long data sets that are very, very wide or have many, many different fields. So let's say that our fields go all the way out to here, or even further, out into kind of Z or AA, and we've got data that fills in all these areas. Well, same thing with freezing columns. All you need to do is come up to the column when you get the black arrow, click on that entire column, and everything to the left then will be frozen. So if we wanted to scroll through this data set from left to right, and we wanted to keep our ID number, or let's say we have someone's name, for example, and we want to freeze that so we can look at it, you come up to Freeze Panes, say Freeze Panes there, and now when I scroll, everything's going to scroll that's going to be right of that first column. So I'm going to go up here and say Unfreeze Panes. And that's the gist of freezing panes. What I want to talk about next is drop downs and lists. And this can be a very powerful function when you're creating tools and when you're creating tools for other people to do things with the data that you have. So let's say that we want a cell to only have certain values in it. So for example, if we're putting together a competency model and we are sending out that competency model to our HR managers, and we want all of our HR managers to rate people on those competencies, but we want to make sure that those competencies are the same across all of the people who are going to be rating, or the ratings are the same. So let's say that our ratings for our competencies, I'm going to click on sheet 3 here. Let's say the ratings for our competencies are low, medium, and high. And just to keep it simple, right? So instead of saying low, maybe they're going to say has some experience or has no experience, or instead of medium, they say has some experience. And so we get all sorts of different answers. So one way that you can prevent that from happening is to create a drop down, which is really, really easy to do. And you can have the drop down in any cell that you want. And basically, all you need to do is create a list of the values that you want in that drop down. So typically what I will do when I'm creating something like this is I will create a tab that says drop downs and lists. So what I'm going to do is add another tab, and I'm going to call it drop downs, and hit enter. And I'm going to say low. Actually, I'm going to title this Competency Ratings, and I'm going to say low, medium, and high. And let's say that in sheet 3, that's where I'm building this tool, and let's say that my competencies are communication, leadership skills, emotional intelligence, etc. All right. What I want to do is I want to make sure that we can only use the values of low, medium, and high for these various competencies. And so let's say that we've got employees listed here. So employee 1, 2. Remember our easy trick, if we highlight this, and we're going to drag this down to 5. So we've got 5 employees listed here across these various competencies. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight these cells, just like that, and I'm going to go to the Data tab. And I'm going to say Data, and I'm going to click on this Data Validation, and I'm going to say Data Validation again. And so right now, all of these cells that I've highlighted are set to any value, and this is the validation criteria. So it's the default is set to any value, but if you click on the drop down, you get a menu of options. In this particular case, what I want to do is select List, and then it's going to say, okay, well, what is the source of that list? And that's why I create that extra tab. It's called Dropdowns. So we're going to click on this arrow, and I'm going to click on the Dropdowns tab, and I'm going to highlight the values that I want to use in my drop-down menu. So then I'm going to click on the arrow again, and I'm going to say OK. And now, anytime I click on one of these cells, it's going to have an arrow, and it's going to give me low, medium, high. And you can put nothing else in this cell. So if I try to type something in this cell that says some experience and hit enter, it's going to give me an invalid value warning. So I'm going to say retry and eventually hit cancel. So then I have to select from the drop down. So one really cool way that we can use conditional formatting with this type of exercise is, let's just go and we'll rate some of these folks on these competencies. So I'm just randomly putting in competencies here. I'm just going to copy these over and start them here, and then select another one here. I'm going to copy these. Oop, I think I pasted there. Yeah. I'm going to copy these and put them here and add something here. Right, so we now have competencies filled out for each of these 3 competencies and these 5 employees. So we're going to do some conditional formatting so that we can see how we shake out. So imagine if this was a list of, 50 employees, and you had 10 competencies across the top, and you wanted a heat map on how you were doing on each of these competencies. Well, we can use conditional formatting to do that. So I've highlighted those cells, and I'm going to say highlight cells rules, and equal to, format cells that are equal to medium. Let's start with low. Those are going to be light red fill with dark red text, right? So that's good. Conditional formatting again, highlight cells equal to, we're going to say medium, and that's going to be, we'll call those yellow. And then again, we're going to do conditional formatting equal to high, and we're going to call those green, and hit OK. So it's very easy now to see how we are doing on each of these competencies, right? And it's very easy to see also how each of these employees are doing across those 3 competencies. So it looks like, when we stack things up against each other, our leadership skills are doing pretty good. We've got 3 people who are high and 1 medium and only 1 low. Emotional intelligence and communication look like they're about the same. But let's say, for example, we had, a bunch of lows in this category. And now when I change these values, because I have conditional formatting built in, they're going to change the color as well. So it's really quite helpful when you're using data like this. So we can very easily look at this and say, oh man, we need to work on emotional intelligence, and how can we do that? Put in some sort of intervention around emotional intelligence, or whatever the case may be. But it's, again, a very easy way to use, in this case, subjective data and to tell a story very easily with conditional formatting and drop-down menus. So that was Module 3, and we'll be back soon with Module 4.